Okay, we're going to start with this beautiful practice that some of you may know because I read it a lot. Heidi and I talked about it, and we thought it would be a great way to move into her presentation on honoring our core truth. So Heidi Juniper is with us here today, and we're going to start with a Gendlin practice. It's called the primacy of human presence, and it's just so beautiful. Gene Gendlin was the father of focusing, the practice that people now really equate with the felt sense in the body. So as we're all coming in and settling in, invite you to just put your books and whatever is on your lap or in front of you beside you, and to really give the body time to settle in, to get comfy in your chair, and to be able to slowly and gently drop your attention down. Soften your gaze and drop your attention down somewhere into the center of your body. And we're going to read Gene Gendlin's beautiful words on the primacy of human presence. So I want to start with the most important thing I have to say. The essence of working with another person is to be present as a living being. And that is lucky, because if we had to be smart or good or mature or wise, then we would probably be in trouble. But what matters is not that. What matters is to be a human being with another human being, to recognize the other person as another being in there, even if it's a cat or a bird. If you're trying to help a wounded bird, the first thing you have to know is that there's somebody in there, and that you have to wait for that person or that being in there to be in contact with you. And that seems to me to be the most important thing. So when I sit down with someone, I take my troubles and feelings and I put them over here on one side, close, because I might need them. I might want to go in there and see something. And I take all the things that I've learned, client-centered therapy, reflection, focusing, gestalt, psychoanalytic concepts, and everything else, and I wish I had even more, and I put them over here on my other side, close. And then I am just here with my eyes, and there is this other being. If they happen to look into my eyes, they will see that I am just a shaky being, and I have to tolerate that. They may not look, but if they do, they will see that. They will see the slightly shy, slightly withdrawing, insecure existence that I am. And I've learned that that is okay. I do not need to be emotionally secure and firmly present. I do need to be present. There are no qualifications for the kind of person I must be. What is wanted for the big therapy process, the big development process, is a person who will be present. And so I have gradually become convinced that even I can be that. Even though I have my doubts when I am by myself, in some objective sense, I know I am a person. So, it's bringing ourselves back into the group. I think, Jean's words are such a nice opening for Heidi Juniper's time being with us together today. Honoring our core truth. And I think our core truth comes out when we are really present. So Heidi, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself. It's always more interesting that way, I think. But just to say that Heidi and I have never met in person, but we've connected over the internet, and we met through Yasim, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we were both really excited about bringing together polyvagal theory and Jenlyn's focusing felt sense practice. Yeah. So,
Shall I
tell
begin?
us, Heidi. Share. Yeah. Share.
Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. I'm so happy to see everyone, and I'm just really warm and happy to be here. Our full title is Honoring the Core Truth. You are the expert on you. And I'm Heidi. This is one of my first times doing a talk like this, and I'm so grateful to Jan and to Annette for making this possible. I'm also so grateful for everyone's flexibility about postponing for a week. I had an unexpected health issue come up. And finally, I'm most of all grateful to Michael Lunde, who has been my committed co-conspirator in the lead up to all of this and has been beyond generous with his time in support of me and the project. And due to an unexpected series of events, he was unfortunately unable to come today, but this would not have unfolded the way it has without him. And Jan asked me to introduce myself. I thought I'd open a little about me. I'm a longtime focuser. Focusing occupies a really important and precious place in my life. And I also am working with the Polyvagal Institute on an ambitious project connected with sharing polyvagal ideas through stories and conversational language. And if you've ever tried to read Porges, you can probably feel the need for adding more feelable words and images. Uh, Although I love the way he talks. I've also been a piano teacher since my teens, and I wholly relate to a person many of you will know of, the writer Rob Foxcroft. I found him listening, I think, to Serge Prengel's Active Pod podcast, and there were all of these shared overlaps. We're both writers and lifelong learners and gluttons for knowledge and piano teachers. And I also write and podcast about psych and neuroscience as applied to everyday life because I feel this stuff is just too vital and too juicy to belong solely to the professionals. And I do feel this passion for the overlap between the felt sense and polyvagal knowledge. And so I'm so connected with what Jan's doing and so excited by it. Coming here today, I was so aware of how long I felt like this lone voice in the wilderness around these topics like safety and reciprocity and relationships. I've gradually been finding more people who think and feel the way Jan does and Jean Genlin did, but it's been tough. I think of what we're doing here today as more of a chance to talk shop than a workshop, but above all, a chance to connect in solidarity because this is a path that the culture really pushes back against and many people don't get. And I can say from experience, it can get really dispiriting and hard, but it really helps to have these chances like that Jan's offering to connect. My heart intention today is really one of heart-to-heart connection, and I hope something will feel resonant to you guys, to you folks, and that if it does, please do let me know in the chat or at the end or in some way. Also, sadly, because he's not here, I'm having to leave out many of my favorite of Michael's insights as a community mental health worker in the Seattle area. He just has this passion for bringing knowledge of how nervous systems work and what safety means to extremely marginalized communities. And he calls us bringing it to the streets and is something of a safetyist. That's kind of his handle for what he is in the world or who he tries to be. Speaking of safety, I'm drawing on some of the exquisite preparation that Michael did around safety. He found these gorgeous quotes from Jan. And Jan, I hope you don't mind being quoted to your face.
What?
I love being quoted, but it's not too much. Not too much. Not too much. Just a snippet. In the new book, Jan writes about how the most important message that polyvagal theory conveys is the primacy of safety. And you speak over and over again about safety and dignity. And you talk about how without safety, our emotions can't be regulated, we don't have good immune function, or as Steve says, the healing properties of the heart aren't activated. But we also know, and this is what's so important for therapists and for teachers, without safety, you don't have trust and rapport, you don't have healing, and you don't have learning. because the physiology of unsafety means we can't access our higher cognitive capacities. And by the way, everything I'm quoting and citing is in a Google Doc I prepared for you, along with some extra tidbits like Steve Porges using our language of the felt sense for the first time that I've heard it. And I think it's because of Jan. So that's in the doc. And there's some other things I've had to cut from time. Some of that will end up in a podcast episode I'm making. And Annette has all those links for you probably near the end of our time. So going back to the core inspiration for this talk, and even where we got our title from, this idea of you are the expert on you, it all goes back to a really special moment between Michael and me. It was early on in our friendship, and he talked about conveying to his clients, you know, I'm the counselor and I'm the expert on this or that, but you are the expert on you. And I got so excited because that's not only my own approach with my own students, but those exact words could have been taken right out of my mouth. And it's been fascinating and surprising to have an ear for those words and then to see how often they come up in the paradigms that I'm drawing on for guidance. And so I'm going to briefly mention those paradigms, but you don't have to worry about keeping track of any of this. It's just background. So going back all the way to the 50s, I've found guidance from Jean Genlin and Carl Rogers and the person-centered approaches. Then from the feminist theorists with their development of what they call relational cultural theory, which anticipates much of relational neuroscience by decades. And then within relational neuroscience, I've looked to Steve Porges and his colleague Ed Tronick and Ed's work with infants and parents. And then finally, I've drawn on body-focused trauma workers like Babette Rothschild, who I also found because of Serge, and David Emerson and his trauma-informed yoga, which he's developed with help from Bessel van der Kolk. But going back to this language about expertise, I'll start with Steve and what he says. The most important thing we can do is show that we are present. We are trying to have a shared moment where we are together with them. We're not the expert, we're with them, we're a team. And then we as a team will find a solution to make life better. David Emerson, speaking to teachers and therapists, says, this kind of work is different because there's no top-down power dynamic. And nobody's experience or knowledge is more important than anybody else's. No one's going to coerce anyone, and no one's going to be the expert. It's a challenge because I think we're afraid to not be experts, and we are invested in our expertise. But if we are not vigilant, we can start doing things that hurt people. Babette Rothschild on Serge's podcast, this just declared in the most integrity-filled way. I'm always looking for them to be my partner in the process, not my patient. I want them to educate me, and I consider them to be the expert on themselves. And the feminist theorists who come with what they view as the ethical stance of coming as equal experts, and that both people are mutually influencing one another. And finally, returning to my starting place with Jean and Carl, and this idea of not coming as a smart, wise, put together authority, but just being a person with another person. That brings us into what reciprocity is really about. This word is Steve's term, and I had a feeling he was borrowing from Tronick, which was confirmed somewhat when I heard him say, I'm good friends with Ed Tronick, and then conclusively when he said, I'm specifically borrowing this term from Ed Tronick. There are some interconnected components to this. What follows is my own synthesis, but I'm drawing from all those traditions. It's not just pulled out of thin air. So in addition to not prioritizing anyone's expertise or knowledge, reciprocity is interwoven with safety and dignity and co-regulation. It's about the dance of connection, a dance that is largely nonverbal and embodied. So it's about eye gaze, it's about facial expression, it's about looking at and listening to each other. It's the back and forth of bodies in sync with each other, the way you see with dogs playing. It requires sensitivity and responsiveness, you know, like a tuned parent with a little child, and presence in the moment. It involves what Porges calls role reversal. So at times, as the more high status person, you would be explicitly following the other person's lead, being the person who doesn't know, who's learning. It requires trust in yourself and trust in them, trust in this whole process that unfolds. It requires the courage to be authentic and open, or as Jan has expressed it, a willingness to be vulnerable, to show up, to be a real human being with another human being. And also it means having the courage to allow things to unfold, to give up this illusion of control. There's an ethical dimension that's about honoring dignity and sharing power, doing with, not doing to. It's about asking for consent and never proceeding without it, which, if you think about it, it's very, very tricky if you're a teacher and you're teaching people who've never consented to be in the building. It's cultivating humility, but also a real groundedness in our own worth to handle honest, sometimes difficult feedback without getting nutty and weird about it. And it's about cultivating the skillfulness to repair the inevitable ruptures that will come. It's also interwoven with not judging and evaluating. Another very sticky point for those of us in education, as Steve says, schools are unsafe because education is evaluative all the time. And as Judith Jordan puts it, it's about mutually facing the question, how can we bear this uncertainty and vulnerability together? There's also some spiritual dimensions to this, which are in the doc. So that's kind of the theoretical stuff. This is the real juicy thing. This is my favorite kind of part of this whole thing. My big aha moment about the essence of reciprocity came with reading Ed Tronick and this surprising and riveting and very readable article he wrote in the late 80s. He opens with this rousing pronouncement that after a decade of controversy, it's clear we've been wrong in assuming that babies are passive recipients of whatever the adult is doing. Instead, it's much more mutual and bi-directional than that. Even just using body language and facial cues, babies are actively taking in and making sense of signals and actively sending signals with wants and goals in mind. And there's this rich, nuanced flow back and forth. And when it goes well, those interactions are described as synchronous or reciprocal. And babies become happy and curious as opposed to sad and withdrawn or angry and unfocused. And then Tronick describes some more extreme cases, some heartbreaking scenarios in order to elucidate what can we learn from what happens when things go wrong between moms and babies. As it happens in the research cases he's looking at, things tended to go the most badly between depressed mothers and their infants, which I'm getting chills that just makes me feel really tenderly toward both those babies and those moms. And here are Tronick's big conclusions in a combination of my language and his. My interpretation is that depressed mothers, in different ways for different mothers, fail to hear and help the baby's efforts to communicate their own goals. What they end up doing is often poorly timed or intrusive, with negative feeling tones that convey the message that the infant should change. You're bad, be different, do better. There's a breakdown in communication and connection, and the babies never get what they're desperately seeking, which leads to sadness, a sense of the uselessness of trying or trusting, profound aloneness, this I only have me, and I gotta just comfort myself. Thus, a general characterization of abnormal interactions is that the participants are stuck in despair and disconnection, and their messages calling for change are disregarded. Their messages calling for change are disregarded. That's the key line. Babies need to be heard and to be agents of change. We tend to think of babies as needing benevolence and kindness, but not reciprocity and respect. But Tronick's saying at any given moment and only having their bodies to cue us, they need to be able to get our attention and to wholly redirect the entire interpersonal dynamic. There's this tug of connection, but also what Ed is really saying, it's about power. Babies need power, not just benevolence. When that doesn't happen, babies learn, mom can't hear you, or even mom's not really there for you. You need to give up on her and rely on yourself. Stepping back a little with the felt sense of sharing power as a kind of birthright, looking at trauma survivors, looking at marginalized populations, looking at school children, we can see how damaging it is to yank power away from people. I hear the trauma healers saying this over and over and over again. Power over is the last thing survivors need because trauma is all about having control stolen from you. And of course, outside of respectful home environments, most kids have never had power. They have comply or defy, and those are the only options. Of course, most people who are imposing their will on others or violating safety and dignity, they either come with good intentions or they just never experienced any other way. But still, the embodied reality is if the influence is all one way, that's a colonizing relationship. And also, power over brings suffering to both parties. The wonderful Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams, a Buddhist teacher, talks about this, that even when one party overtly is benefiting from inequality, uh, like in the form of white privilege, still everyone is in a suffering. Everyone is less complete and whole due to this lack of reciprocity. And this is my second favorite part. These relational disconnects are so interwoven with us having a severed relationship with our own bodies. No, I don't love that we have the severed relationship. I just find this connection here between that I'm about to describe between Steve Porges and the felt sense so meaningful. Because this disconnect from our own bodies is something Steve Porges talks about all the time. How school recreates this Descartes mind-body split. He talks about how we're told as students, sit still, pay attention. Don't let your bodily feelings to be the motivator in your life. I think that's the direct quote. Don't let your bodily feelings to be the motivator in your life. It's all about suppressing and denying your feelings and numbing those embodied feedback loops. Get over it, get on with it, get your work done. It's all that kind of thing. And so when Steve says, don't let your bodily feelings be the motivator of your life, I hear that as meaning that impulse to pee. Don't think that means you have the right to get up and go do that. And the impulse to wriggle, you can't wriggle. And the impulse to lean in and touch things and explore and connect with your friends, that's not up to you. Stifle that, ignore that, and at your peril, because you need those impulses. But if you listen to them, you'll be punished. Or that impulse to move away, to shake things off, to go somewhere else, somewhere quiet and get calm again. You don't have the right to that bodily self-ownership and that safety and dignity either. And there's even a scene in the TV show Friday Night Lights that made this huge impression on me, where one of the players says, Coach, we just feel that there's some drama happening. Coach, we just feel that. And Coach says, I don't care what you feel. And that is school in a nutshell, especially in the context of what Steve is talking about. But stepping back, if we think about it for a moment, what would it even sound like to engage with children and teens when it comes to their messages for change? Can we go outside more? Could we learn some stuff I care about? Could we make it so we can go to the bathroom when we want to? Why do you do all the talking? Why can't I talk to my friends? Like, what would a teacher say? Let me call a meeting of the superintendents? So through this schooling process that has this crazy momentum of its own and imprisons all of us in these patterns we don't enjoy, the head and the heart become severed and everything becomes about head knowledge and being guided by external imperatives. No felt sense flow back and forth, that bi-directional conversation between the nervous system and the head. Instead, we learn that, put all that away and be a certain way, because the messy truth of you is not welcome here. No one's here to welcome that in and help you figure that out. Embodiment teacher Philip Shepard says something so evocative about all of this. We withdraw from the body, we demean its intelligence and live in the head. And we spend our days finding our thoughts about the world more interesting than the world itself. We don't feel where we are. We are not located, we are dislocated. And we end up in, I hear Gene Gendlin in this, a shattered universe of random pieces that have no real relationship with each other. So this is not easy stuff for people to really look at, although I feel relief in talking and addressing it openly. But it's maddening stuff and it's heartbreaking stuff, especially because as teachers in school systems and also for therapists in other settings, we're not always acting as ourselves so much as conduits. We're forcing people to comply with demands because that serves a larger social agenda. And we ourselves are also in positions where our inner wisdom is being disrespected and we are being exposed to constant judgment and evaluation and unsafety. We also are losing out. The single thing Steve brings up the most about reciprocity is that with co-regulation, the benefits are mutual, they're reciprocal. When they're not, caregivers and healers burn out. When we're having power over and not with, we lose so much of the joy and the warmth and the settling and the enlivening of just being social animals and connection with our beautiful young or others that need us. So although individually, so much of this does not serve us and we yearn to be done with it, all of this lack of reciprocity is built into the system because it serves a purpose. As Brene Brown says, not being seen keeps us small, and it's meant to. Feminist Judith Jordan says it so well. These are some excerpts from an article of hers, which Brene Brown is generally drawing on too. Shaming serves to disconnect people from themselves and their true feelings, and from other people. Shaming silences and isolates people, especially marginalized people, which I would say, speaking as me, very much includes children around our planet. And it keeps oppressed people disempowered, and it keeps them from expressing their reality and their truth in a way that would threaten and upend the dominant view. So that's grim, but it's better to see it and know it than be in denial of it. And to me, it feels very urgent, having felt these sorts of things for most of my life, that 30 years now, that we do look at it and not turn away. But it can be hard to grapple with, and especially hard to change it, which makes me think of something else that I heard Jan say in one of your online talks in response to the question, so, well, how do we change things? And you said in a paraphrase, it's hard, it's really hard, and it takes time and it takes patience, which you've had to develop. And we have to talk about this stuff in ways that are non-threatening and that people can access through their bodies. That's when they start to listen. And I think the non-threatening part of all that is very important, because we have this natural deep instinct to jump to the defense of people or familiar situations because they had good intentions. And we certainly jump to our own defense, our own beautiful intentions and our hard-won knowledge and expertise, because we mean well. But if we have a moment of safety to ask our bodies about all of this, most of us can picture a moment of trying so hard to capture the attention of someone important, someone big, and appeal to them. Look at me, look back here, hear me, see me, take me seriously. We can feel that desperate dejection and powerlessness that comes from having that person turn away and not respond. And that feeling of futility lives in us all somewhere. For me, it comes in different ways, but often a sag in the shoulders and a dropping down and a pinching in the heart, and just why? There's no use. No one, I'm invisible. We've all been in need and had someone turn away, someone very important. And the even more unbearable thing to face and look at is we've all done that to someone, not meaning to. Maybe we were depressed, like those depressed mothers, or we were overwhelmed, or maybe we didn't know better. But getting to the hopeful parts, it's helpful to remember, for instance, that all of Ed Tronick's work is about how our lives are a series of errors that we repair. And individually and relationally and collectively, we grow from that process. My favorite part of his new book is where he says that stumbling into each other, crashing into each other, bumping into walls, is the path. He draws on, I think, complex systems theory to tease out this overarching insight. He compares it to the Big Bang, that bumping into each other unleashes new information and new energy. And he's really clear. There are interpersonal dynamics that are not generative, that are chronically harmful. But just missing each other in the dance of connection, this does seem to be integral to growth, which is encouraging, and we need that encouragement to do this hard work. So bringing this all home, and pretty much on time, I think. Jan, I love that you don't like to be quoted to your face, because I'm just quoting you so much to your face. Jan, so the last time I'll quote you, you have this stirring language about moments of liberation, feeling freed by being seen in a light that's on the other side of pathology and shame and humiliation. And I see all of this that we're talking about as a shift to liberation. Once we've seen this other way, felt it, understood the truth of it, we can't unknow what we know. We can't unfeel what we feel. So as best we can moving forward, we have to be crystal clear with ourselves where our own lines are and where we won't go to, because we can't breathe there. And we have to be able to make that work within the institutions we're a part of, or we have to leave and find the people who are aching for this too, because they are there. It's taken me a long time to find them, but I am finding them. Because we can't go back to being small And we can't put up with people sugarcoating these top-down dynamics that they've softened a little, but not really changed, like by putting a smiley sticker that says compassion on it. And this is where some of my drive to explore this paradox of reciprocity within unequal relationships in applied polyvagal theory comes from, because I've heard well-respected people who market themselves as polyvagal informed and otherwise are really know their stuff, who talk about compassionate evaluation. But Steve is so clear, once you have evaluation, safety's out the door. So talking about compassionate evaluation is like talking about compassionate colonialism, a kinder, gentler coercion. You're just, this is my favorite line, you're just serving up coercion with polyvagal informed donuts and a side of trauma-aware chocolate milk. At some point in the shift to liberation, as we're transforming the old ways, they become resistant to truly changing. And in order to welcome the new, we have to allow the old containers to break apart and fall away. But on a practical level, how? I feel there's a leap of moral bravery involved that needs acknowledgement and to be fed and encouraged by ourselves and others. And it's about realizing, and my own inner recovering perfectionist needs to hear this more than once, that perfection is not required, because we absolutely are going to get it wrong in the process. This is a shared ongoing dance of connection, and everyone deserves forgiveness for what they have not learned yet. The beautiful teacher Vivian Paley, working with preschoolers and young children, says, children don't deserve to be punished for what they simply haven't learned yet. And I would say neither do we. We deserve forgiveness from ourselves, from others. It's part of what makes the humility and courage and openness that reciprocity requires of us possible. And it's vital, and I think David Emerson says this so well, to be within our own boundaries and to ourselves feel safe offering radical reciprocity. It's very, very new to most of us, as well as very old to our species, and it takes a lot of experimentation and support and ideas from others. We need help and ingenuity and emotional camaraderie. We have to link arms with others walking this path, because there's no going back. There's no going back. We know too much. We have felt too much to go back. I can't say it any better than the writer and poet philosopher Bayo Akomolafe does. And this comes from some various sources, but this is my ending point. It's about becoming different bodies. You're not going to learn these things from a workshop or a book, but I just know that following a different path, it's not the same body walking that path. So I'm so grateful to you all for listening, and I'm so pleased I made it through all that without exploding. I want to make sure you get the links I promised and the Google Docs. There's a link to my podcast page. The Reciprocity episode is not up yet, but if you go to the link, it'll take you to a short Radio Boise story I did that I just snuck polyvagal theory into, and I'm building a Substack, and the edgiest thing that I couldn't put in here is probably going to be in there. So I'm so curious how this felt for everyone, and I'd love to know what resonated with you or spoke to you. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Heidi. That was wonderful. I really love the way you're really challenging people to go down into the depths of assumptions that we make, and to really rethink and re-experience that. And that's really wonderful. And if there was ever a time, especially now in the world, where we really need to do that, right? Because it's that, again, that beautiful thing that, Steve talks about, where we all need each other to be able to actually move through things like wars and COVID. And so let's open it up. What are people feeling? What's happening in your body as you're with all of this? Questions, things you want to explore and dig into with Heidi? Gareth, you had a raised hand? Yeah.
Yes, there was a lot of great things. Thank you, Heidi. There's a lot of great things and things that stood out. And I'm training nearly the end of my course of being a person-centered counsellor anyway, working with male survivors of sexual abuse. And we're in this country, it's one of 4 only in this country. But it resonated, and Rogers is so doesn't get spoke of much nowadays. You know, it almost feels we've let him by, and doing the course, and I was doing the Rogers and the core conditions that he says were necessary for growth to take place. And as I began to look at the polyvagal theory, I said, you know what, that scientifically proves Rogers' core conditions through the nervous system, and moving as a therapist from who's incongruence, being able to allow a client to move from incongruence to congruence, you know, and it explains, it works wonderfully, the polyvagal. And when I've explored with clients, what did you notice first about the experience? Was it the thoughts that was running almost like in a loop, or was it? And it's very hard for clients because people jump straight to the thoughts, like you said, it jumps straight to what's in here. And it's very hard to explain what's happening in that kind of felt sense in the body. And, you know, Rogers never wanted much theory because it was the human experience. It was that actually the experience, that allowing somebody to reflect, use silence, reflection, to hear those words back, almost like you being a mirror for somebody, to kind of, is that experience changes and allows that path towards growth. And there was other things, you mentioned power, and there's a great book, it's an old book, Power versus Force by David Hawkins. And he developed this consciousness, and he used power as a very positive thing, and force was the negative. So if I'm looking at the polyvagal theory and I'm in survival or defense, that's where force comes in. So tyrannies or things, coercion, it's almost disempowering people with their power by using force. Whereas, you know, so if I'm, as a person-centered counselor, I want to empower people because they are the experts in their experiences. Mm-hmm. So they feel disempowered, they feel lost or whatever, but you're able to inside develop that kind of whatever power is or whatever, but it's that kind of knowing themselves. It's moving from the external locus of evaluation or those defensive systems and bridging it towards that organismic self, as Rogers called it, or the core self, or self-energy as the IFS calls it, or the social connection, you know, the social engagement system, where we actually feel that kind of sense of what self is. And
so let's Gareth, let's get Heidi in here to comment on some of what the great stuff you're saying
as well. I want to talk, I do waffle. So
I know, it's good. It's good. We love that you're excited.
I love it. I think we're tools, Gareth. I think we're synthesizers, the way you're bringing all these strings in. If you have more you want to say, you don't get to say here, send me an email. There's a link in the doc, and you can find me, or Jan can send you me. But I love what you're saying, and there's so much to respond to, but the one thing that really jumped out at me, I love the idea of looking at Carl and Steve and seeing how they speak to each other. But Carl Rogers, he wrote extensively about education, and he really, really influenced me at a very young age. I read him as a teenager, and I felt the truth of what he was saying in my body, and it built on other things I'd read and felt. And the dissonance between that and what I was experiencing as an overachiever, as a very successful student in school, made me quit college. I had it all paid for. I had this big grant, and I just knew I couldn't exist in a way of integrity as a teacher within that system, and that the degree wouldn't serve me. But so it goes back to a very pivotal moment in my life, but it is that feeling of, you see these words and they really resonate in your heart and you can't go back. But the last thing I'll say about to Gareth is that interest in Carl alongside of Jean, Rob Foxcroft's book. I forget what it's called, but Hearing, Being Heard, something like that. He separates those two strands, and he writes about it so beautifully, and you might enjoy it. It's a gorgeous book.
Okay.
I would love to hear from others if there's more.
Sorry.
Some other people have hands up. Let's do a few more. So Helen? Where are you, Helen?
Hi there. I'm in Toronto.
Oh, so am I.
I'm hi, Jen.
Hi.
This is my first time with this group, so I'm really happy to be here. And
Oh, you're welcome.
Heidi, I really enjoyed everything you had to say. It all resonated with me. I'm a Gestalt trained psychotherapist, trying to learn more about polyvagal theory. I've taken a little bit of training on it. But the things that I just wanted to mention today that stood out when you spoke about a theorist who talked about it was thought previously that babies are passive, but actually they're fully engaged. What came up for me is we get trained in the Toronto Institute and in New York, as well as some of the other places in the United States, by a woman named Ruella Frank. And Ruella has a Somatic Experiencing Institute in New York, does a lot of work with the parent-child dyad, and especially with how intergenerational trauma is passed on. So when you talked about this, that came up for me, and it allowed me to have like another reading to look at to really expand on that, because I find a lot of the work that I do with clients has to do with childhood trauma, either an incident trauma or, family of origin situations where, again, intergenerational trauma is present. So that really stood out for me. And the other thing as well is I've experienced this personally, as probably many, if not all of us have, in our own personal experiences, and then with the clients that we work with or whatever professions that we're a part of. When shame is present, how much it shuts down the body, but how you elaborated it in terms of, how we lose cognitive functioning and then we can't be fully aware. And I mean, I remember experiencing this in high school and thinking, I don't remember half the stuff that I learned. It was lucky that I learned quickly and that I actually got through university simply because I could catch up. But I'm thinking about people who either give up or can't catch up, and how many people get marginalized in society from shame. So I could also probably go on about all the things that I love to hear today, Heidi. So I'm going to look forward to your podcast and your docs and the links, and just wanted to say thank you so very much.
Mhm.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so moved to hear all that. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Thank you so much. I'm really humbled. I did have a thought. You talked about loving to encounter these things in another way, and I had an impulse to suggest Bonnie Badenoch's book,
Okay.
Healing Trauma in the Context of Relationships. She's been my mentor, and it's a giant book, but somewhere in there she talks about tracing back experiences that are before we have memories of them, and it felt like it would resonate. And she's beautiful when she's a colleague and a friend of Steve's, and her language about his stuff is beautiful, and she's able to explain it in a relational way. Like, she almost never mentions anatomy. So yeah, thank you so much.
Could you spell me her last name?
It's bad, the word bad, Enoch, and it's her newest book.
Okay, awesome.
And she's been on a ton of podcasts.
That's fantastic.
Oh, and Katerina found Feeling Heard, Hearing Others by Rob Foxcroft.
Ah, there we go.
You're feeling
Yeah.
heard, hearing others. There we go. I can picture the cover.
Yeah. Okay, Darcy, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I saw this posted on the Facebook page, so thank you, for polyvagal theory. And I follow that just for my own personal interest. I'm from my own therapy, my own trauma healing, it's helped me so much. I also teach at a university, project management courses, and I work as a coach in corporations. And I had never before today considered like the power dynamic. And so this is going to really help. Just this talk today is going to really help me think about, being conscious of that, the power over versus the reciprocity. And you've really got my gears turning. So any resources you have around this sort of stuff for teachers, I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Oh, that's gorgeous. Nothing's coming up right away, but maybe if you could email me just so I have your email contact. I'm sure something will come.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Thank you very
Okay.
much. I'm so moved, Darcy. I'm so glad you came. I'm so glad you all came. Thank you so much.
We still got a bit of time. John?
Hi, thank you so much. I loved your metaphor of us going through life and bumping into each other and forgiving each other and learning. I just love that. And what I got out of this was my trick is to stay in the ventral vagal branch. Because if I can stay in the ventral vagal branch, then I can do that connection stuff. And I'm also got this weird idea that when I'm in the sympathetic nervous system, it's my ego talking. And if I can slide into the ventral vagal branch, then I'll be more humble, have more humility, be more able to connect. And I think, I'm not sure about this, that the way I'm using to activate my parasympathetic nervous system is device-assisted slow, deep breathing. Do you have any comments on this?
Oh, I think that's so meaningful. I love that. I know Steve would be so moved to hear you talking about, I think, this idea of the being in ventral vagal being where we're out of ego. He talks on the Trey podcast about messages from Shiva. He writes the origin story as if it's a myth that he got polyvagal theory, as if he got it on this like spiritual path. And I think that's going to be a book. And then I just love what you're saying. And it kind of created an aha for me, because picturing being deep in ventral vagal, it's almost impossible to yell at a student. It is impossible to yell at a student there, right? Like you just can't, you have to get big to yell at people or
Yeah.
yeah. So I think that's gorgeous. And the last thing you said, the deep breathing. Yeah, Steve talks about that a lot, the deep breathing and some kind of yoga where you do deep breathing. He's done some articles and talks about that. So I think, yeah, I think he would.
Well, there's a paper by some very famous guys who look at heart stuff. And what they found was that device-assisted breathing was much better than meditation in terms of lowering blood pressure. And so my take on that is blood pressure goes down when you relax. And when you relax, that means getting into the ventral vagal branch. So that's just my weird ideas, but it's a wonderful paper, which I think says that device-assisted breathing is the best way to get into things. And I know that my machine broke down a month ago and I went into fear and terror. But the good news is I got a new one today, so I can get back, I can get out of my grumpy old man state and more into my calm, serene, being a monk state. Thank you.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Well, anything about the heart, I know Steve would love. I'm curious if anybody's done any papers on like connection assisted breathing, play assisted breathing. So where there's that social connection and the heart regulation. But that's beautiful. Thank you so much, John. Thank you.
And Eddie?
Yeah, I was just thinking about heart rate variability biofeedback being, are you familiar with heart math?
Yes,
Yeah.
I was just thinking
Yeah. So I'm sorry, I missed so much of this because my phone was telling me that I was waiting for the meeting to start and it had been going on for like 20 minutes and then I got a phone call. But
We actually, just to say that we actually had, I think our second or third meeting, right, was on heart math, wasn't it?
I'm
And
sorry.
yeah, no, but you know what? You can find it because we have recordings posted on the group page. Maybe could you send a link, maybe, Annette? Yeah. What
But
was
in
the person's name?
like on the app and in some of their materials, it says, think about or envision or cultivate this or that kind of feeling. So if you cultivate that feeling of playfulness and fun, that it's just really, that's been a very helpful tool for me,
Right.
the HRV stuff. But I did come in time to hear you say something about Rene Descartes, and I have been going around railing about how he was the beginning of the end for the human race, because he convinced us that we were brains, and we became this disembodied culture, and and the whole thing of colonialism and you name it, that we've gotten to the point where we're having this infant formula shortage and nobody's talking about breastfeeding. Oh, it's like, hello, we need to revive wet nursing. Infants are supposed to be held unless they are asleep. And so, those early attachments, and, I just, there's so many things I could go on and on about. But as far as today's topic, I've just been really concerned about what I see as the professionalization and commercialization of what used to be traditional social roles, and like parents, teachers, clergy, spiritual leaders, friends, so that now we're getting to the point where we're paying people all the time to do things that in a village, in a traditional society, are just done because that's part of the community. And we have no communities, and we're warehousing babies and warehousing older people, and it's just killing us. And and I'm to the point in my personal life where, like, I just came from 2 back-to-back therapy sessions in other towns. Like, I have to pay for friends, because it's like, otherwise, I just can't connect, because people are so, and I don't think a lot of it's about me, it's about our culture, and that people are, more connected to their devices, and they don't know how to make eye contact and behave like primates, And
Right.
COVID didn't help. I mean, this was well in effect even before COVID, we're supposed to be sitting around picking the bugs out of each other's hair and stuff, and not sitting at home staring at an electronic screen. And it's just, people just don't realize how much this Western intellectualized and industrialized way of life is, it's like, I'm sorry, I'm just like,
no, I'm loving what you're saying, and you should look in the chat. People are loving it. Do you pronounce it Edie or Eddie? Eddie. Okay. I'm loving what you're saying, and there's synchronicity all across the board. Heart math connects.
But, I'm just really have been trying to, because so often, like in healthcare scenarios and with therapy, it's all about, you were talking about the evaluation, the compassionate evaluation. That's an oxymoron. It's like, I was real into this spiritual stuff for a while. You're familiar with the Course in Miracles?
Mm-hmm.
And I read this little book called The Healing Power of Kindness. And it was talking about how there was a question, is therapy a profession? And it's like, we're always doing therapy on each other constantly. And just the idea that, we have these life coaches and all these people that we're paying to do things that we really shouldn't have to do.
Yeah.
And, people shouldn't have to pay for to have someone throw their kid in a crib. And I don't know.
Yes.
No,
it's beautiful.
Yeah, but getting out of it is the problem. It's like, my mom just passed, and it's like, here I am, parentless. And it's like, I don't know what to do, because I have no, like, really.
Well, Eddie, you're doing it right now. And we're all doing
it. Like in
right
my day-to-day life. Like I tried to start a group on the Polyvagal Institute. Nobody joined, but
you're here. You're here with us. And Nat,
Yeah.
have a look. And Nat, why don't you talk a bit about, we have to go.
Okay, sorry.
Just in a couple of
Thank you.
minutes. Why don't
Thank
you
you,
talk
Eddie.
about the changes groups? Because Eddie may find this is really this was Jenlin's vision, and it's Steve's too. He always talks about the Polyvagal family.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So Annette, say a little bit about changes groups.
Yeah, so they're free, they're drop-in, and we just break up into peer-to-peer small groups, groups of 2, groups of 3. There's different varieties. Some locations have them in person. So the focusing.org website, you might be able to find in-person groups where you are. There's so many different focusing groups. I have one that's online. It actually meets tonight at 7 p.m. So if you're free in 2 hours, you can join us. And it's really about peer-to-peer focusing and listening. So you're exchanging, you get a focusing turn and a listening turn. So you do both roles, and it's a beautiful way to get what you need in a peer-to-peer exchange.
Jenlin started these groups, I think, was it in the 60s? I think it was a long time ago, and they've just kept going because focusing partnerships are all about co-regulating, and it's such beautiful, deep work.
I'll put the link.
Okay, so Annette, do we have a name for the next meetup?
Yes, it's well, let me look it up. Sorry, I'm gonna forget it, the last name. It's Joanne Lutz, L-U-T.
Oh, Joanne is here with us. Yeah.
Yes, I am, but I'm lying in a hammock, so I don't want you to see me.
In 1 or 2 sentences, share with us what you're going to do so people will know. We'll post it, but.
Okay. Well, through a gradual process of learning somatic experiencing and then polyvagal theory, I started to identify how each yoga pose and breathing practice is working with the vagus nerve. And it adds a whole nother dimension to yoga. So I call it nervous system informed trauma sensitive yoga. That's what it's
Perfect.
about.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, thank you, Heidi, so much. I think people loved it. Was a great, was really great. And I hope we'll all take it. And I, for one, am totally into like getting underneath and making huge paradigm shifts in the field of trauma and absolutely in the field of addiction, to really make that shift into understanding that addictions are adaptive responses in the nervous system. They help us to shift states when it isn't safe, to relax in the body and to regulate through ventral. So that's my pitch. But we all, there's a place in all of us, I think, where we can really start or continue to challenge ourselves. And Heidi's really doing that. And it's wonderful work. It takes courage, but it's wonderful work. And it brings us together here in spaces like this, right? Which are growing a lot. So stay connected, and we're working on a much better system for really being able to dynamically relate to each other. It's coming, but it takes time to make the switch. But it's coming. Know that it's coming. Jerry's working on it. Okay, thank you. And for those of you that had a bit of trouble getting into the room, our apologies.
Someone asked
Technology is-
how to get a hold of me. I'm Heidi
Oh,
Juniper on Facebook.
Put it in the chat, Heidi.
Okay, Heidi, and I'm a kindfulheidi@gmail.com. I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah. Okay.
So grateful for this. Thank you guys so much.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Be well and safe as much as possible. We'll see you next month. We'll put the notice up, and enjoy Joan. We have quite a few people coming, actually, right, Annette?
We're working on July and August. as
July
well.
and August is me and Joya de Cruz on how to find safety. Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye now. Bye-bye.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.
Bye-bye.